Welcome to Pastor's Chat today. Well, we have finished Revelations chapter 1, and we'll be looking now at the next few weeks, probably at chapters 2 and 3, where John writes the letters to the 7 churches in Asia. Now, we're reminded of this in chapter 1 because in verse 4 of chapter 1, John to the 7 churches in Asia. And then in verses 10 and 11 of chapter 1, he heard that voice as a sound of a trumpet, and it said, I'm Alpha and Omega. What you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia. And then he specifically says to the churches in Asia, which are Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. So now, no doubt there were a lot of churches in Asia, but Jesus picked these 7 specific churches probably because of the specific message he wanted to give to those churches, but I also think that those churches are probably descriptive of so many of our churches today. And so it's important that we're realizing that Jesus loves his church. In Ephesians chapter 5, it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Jesus loves the local church. He loves the pastors. He loves the members. He loves the assembly of believers. He loves the worship of that local church and the ministry of that church. But he wants that church to be a witness in this dark and dying world. And so here we have 7 churches, specific churches, that John is told by Christ to write a letter to. And so we see this outline that he gives us in verse 19 of the first chapter. Write the things which you've seen, the things which are, and the things which will be after. So now he's dealing with those things which are happening, present tense, right now in those 7 churches in Asia. And so we see in chapters 2 and 3 that Jesus is standing in the midst of the church. He is examining these churches with his eyes that are as if they're flames of fire. And he's doing that today. It matters to Jesus what's happening in the church. It doesn't matter what the denominational leaders are saying in a sense, or whoever else might be in charge. What matters is what Jesus sees going on in his church. And I'm going to tell you, we don't sweep anything under the rug from the eyes of Jesus. He sees it all. He sees it all. He even sees the motives behind the pastor's heart and the leader's heart, the deacons, the elders, and those who are leading the church, and every member of the church. And so he loves the church. What does Jesus think of your church? What do you think he sees in your church that you're attending today? What would you think he would write to your church today? Now, I think it's really interesting, and won't have a lot of time to delve into this, but every one of these 7 churches, in the letter to them, the first thing you read, and I want to just read, like for instance in chapter 2 verse 1, to the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things says he who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. To the angel of the church at Smyrna in 8, these things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. To the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things says he who has the sharp 2-edged sword. So we should note that the different elements of the description of Jesus Christ that we read back in chapter 1, and we have talked about the description, the glorified Christ, the majestic Christ, and John described him in his glory. He falls at his feet as dead. Every one of those descriptions, it appears, is repeated in the introduction to each of these 7 churches. And he says, he who walks in the midst of the churches, he who says, I am the first and the last, he who has the keys of David, goes back to chapter 1. So the specific message has to do with a different characteristic of the very person of Jesus Christ, looking at that particular church and seeing their particular need. Oh, he really is interested in the church. Now, the danger for these churches was that he would remove the candlestick, remove their witness, their testimony. So important that the church has a witness for Jesus Christ in the community. That's what we'll be looking at in these next few days. God bless you. Pray for your church and your pastor today. God bless. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.